a piece on Brevity, a journal of creative nonfiction. Aisha Papataya Buchak, a teacher and writer of creative nonfiction, published an address to my fellow faculty who have asked me to speak about my work. I was hooked by the title. As I read the piece, I wish I'd written it myself. My work, Buchak began, is to write this sentence and revise it into that sentence. To take this word and replace it with that word. Oh yes. My work is a novel I wrote from 5 to 7 a.m. for more than 2 years, and that will never be published, she said. Gosh, yes. I used Buchak's essay as a jumping off point for a conference paper about the kinds of research a writer of fiction undertakes. Recently, I've been forced to examine my work of teaching and mentoring through quite a different lens. While trying to justify parts of my work on a purely pragmatic level, I yearn for a more poetic expression of what it is we do as writers. Buchak's essay thrust itself into my consciousness again. So I will use it as a framework for our event tonight to remind you, as writers of narrative nonfiction, of the magic you create. And to inspire you, our audience, to take up a magic word wand of your own. So most of the phrases that start with my work are written by Buchak. My work is to be the person you trust to tell the truth, even though I am a known liar. My work is to see who you are and who I think you could become. To notice the slate gray night lit by a full moon, half behind a cloud. To know what it is to want more from someone than they are willing to give. To see the shadows cast by your secrets. To notice an ant that has drowned in a single drop of water in my sink. My work is to explain my heart, even though I cannot explain my heart. My work is to find the right word, even though there is no right word. When we examine the word home, sometimes home is the place you're from, sometimes it's the place you return to after a long absence, sometimes it's the place you create for yourself. In Where the Heart Is, Caitlyn Charlebois reflects on a childhood bedroom and its transitions over time as a young girl grows up. Caitlyn. How tall are you?
Oh, that's all. Where does the human feel safest? Comfort comes when they can ultimately be themselves. Extroverted people may be the most at home around groups of people where they can be the center of attention. On the other hand, like many others, I would rather die than making friends with that many people. People are tiring and often remind me how important my home is. However, when I was young, usually that's also where my family was. Although not loud or intrusive, I was still raised to believe my bedroom was the only place that offered complete privacy. This space, like me, has changed over the years. We have grown together, changed personalities, and transformed over time. Of course, no one stays the same from ages 3 to 20, and my bedroom has been an expression of that, of me. The pink room is what started it all. When we moved into the red and white house on Cassandra Drive, I was only 3 years old. My mom asked what color I wanted to paint the walls. Coincidentally, 3 is about the age you choose personality, and mine happened to be defined by pink. My mom decided the rest of the decorations, but over the years, I added a dollhouse, posters of Taylor Swift and One Direction, and eventually a disco ball. It became a setting for my family of dolls, a stage for the theater productions I would put on for my sister, and a dance party for my friends. It was a sanctuary of a young girl growing up and learning about the world. This space was all mine, but also very attached to my parents. It was the bedroom across the hall from theirs. Every night before they went to sleep, they would check for lights underneath my covers. If I felt rebellious, I would try and read with a flashlight. My love for reading began with how I could relate to Junie B. Jones and her second-grade struggles, but slowly advanced into Harry Potter and his friends' magical adventures. It was an innocent rebellion that never ended in actual need of punishment. I slept with the door open because I feared the dark, worried that there might be monsters under my bed. However, regardless of the shadows, I felt safe. It was my haven. My childhood room was the imposter of growing up. I pretended it was my own, but if I cried when I had a nightmare in the middle of the night, my mom could always hear it. I was safe under their watchful eye. However, isn't that what being a child is? When I was 14, my sister moved her bedroom to the basement. Her moving meant that I finally got the attic room. I'd always thought it was better than the pink room, and not just because it was located farther down the hall from my parents. It had slanted ceilings on both sides, a better view of the valley below. My mom helped me paint what little wall space there was a dark purple. When I decorated the room, I pushed the bed against the wall under the slanted ceiling to ensure as much floor space as possible. Of course, it went against my mom's concerns that I would hit my head in the dark. I always rolled my eyes at that comment, telling her I hadn't run to their room from a nightmare in years. The room was mine, and she didn't get a say about where I put my things. It became again my safety, where no one got a say in what I did or who I was. When I had a bad day at school or got into a fight with my sister, I would run down the hall and slam the door closed. Shutting myself away in the attic, no one saw my sadness or anger, and I could let every emotion out without worrying what people thought. I had grown out of my childish fear of monsters in the dark. The reading with a flashlight was replaced with scrolling on Instagram for hours before falling asleep. My rebellious phase had taken a new form, one that was self-destructive for any young person. Suddenly I was exposed to the world in a new way, all from the safety of my bedroom. I compared myself and my life to people's perfect representation that they portrayed online. At the time, I believed them and thought of myself as less than. Those teenage years, classified by the attic room, were years of growing up at a distance from my parents. My bedroom was a safe place and the world's expectations, but also a portal into its dark depths. In the end, I began to slowly transition out of the attic into adulthood. It began at age 17 when I packed up over half my bedroom and moved to university. Although I began to call my dorm room home, it did not carry the same feelings. Because I shared it with my roommate, it never became my safe place. There was always someone stopping me from feeling completely free. So I clung to the attic when I was home, and I would fall back into my guarded behavior. Then came the pandemic. I was forced to live at home with everything online, and my parents renovated the basement. At age 20, I moved to the room with the French doors. It was attached to the foyer, separated by double frosted glass doors. The bedroom had white painted walls to match the rest of the house, a window nearly as large as the wall, and gray hardwood floors that were always cold. My mom again allowed me to pick the furniture and decorate it however I wanted. However, this time, the wall decorations, including my sizable collection of Polaroid pictures from high school and university memories, were all held with sticky tack. They were ready to be packed up and moved at a moment's notice. I spent most of the pandemic in that room, and now, having moved back to school again, only visit occasionally on holidays and breaks. Although it is where I feel the most comfortable, it is not the home I remember. Everything, however, that seems to just be life. With my parents removed from me by a flight of stairs, they did not get control of my life like they used to. I did not have to rebel because I'm an adult who can make my own choices. I experienced enough of the world to know how to guard myself without becoming lost in its depths. It's a changed mindset, but it occurred with growing up. I am beginning to feel as though I'm transitioning away to a new place, a new home. Some cringeworthy cross-stitch in my parents' living room says, "Home is where your heart is." I have always seen it, but pondered over its meaning. My heart is in my body, so is home just an expression of where I am? It always caused me to question why I called my home a home. These feelings continued once I moved to university and was unsure where I belonged. Looking back at the different phases of growing up, I know the places that I felt most at home have always been an expression of who I was at the time. It has changed with every stage of life, but remained a place of safety, the setting I can always turn to be myself. From learning how to be independent under my parents' watchful eye at age 3, trying to express myself without my parents' help at age 14, or transitioning out of my family's house at age 20, my bedroom will always be a safe place. Entering adulthood means appreciating these places for what they are and what they provided me, but understanding that I am not attached to them. They have had my heart from a time, but my feelings have changed with every phase of life. The last room, the room with the French doors, has gone cold. It is now just a place where I sleep when I visit my family until I officially transition again. However, my next transition will be at the front door.
Sanctuary, prison, hospital. Josh Bolema explores the changing four walls of home. Josh.
There were never any posters on the walls of my bedroom. No pictures there either. In fact, unlike the decor in most people's rooms, there was nothing of any sort hanging from the walls of mine. Growing up, my room was always plain. I don't quite know my reasoning for this. Maybe it was because it created a space free of judgment, or, at the very least, it created a space where the only judgment someone made upon entering my room was the lack of items, not the content of the items themselves. Or perhaps it was simply because I didn't have anything that I thought was worthy of hanging up, and had no desire to find something that was. Nonetheless, that was the way of my room, and despite appearing rather empty, it was my room, the appeal of which was not found on the walls, but inside the drawers. See, it wasn't how the room looked, but how it served to make me feel safe and secure. No matter what was going on in the outside world, my room would always be there, ready and waiting for me to enter. It was my own little house, my sanctuary inside the family home. My little house would soon be deserted as I went off to Briarcrest College in Saskatchewan. Living in a new province, I was suddenly away from family and friends. This may be an easy transition for some, but not for others. I was one of the others. Since I was rather shy, socially anxious, and living in a new environment, I barely left my dorm room except for class or hockey. My fellow dormmates in RA failed to include me in any of their activities. So while they were off doing something as a group, I remained trapped in this room. The one thing that remained constant in my new environment was that I didn't bring anything to hang on these walls either. But unlike my room back home, this place was not my room. Everything that made my old room feel like my room didn't exist here. The drawers were empty. The walls could not even do their job of making me feel safe. The room felt and looked lifeless. It was as colorless as a droplet of water or an old black and white movie. It was as if the cone cells in my eyes stopped working when I entered. This room didn't feel like a house inside of a home. It was a cell inside of a prison, and I the prisoner. During the later stages of first semester, and despite my extreme shyness, God blessed me with a friend, a fellow hockey teammate named Adrian. He lived in the same building, just 2 floors above. He soon came to see the invisible yet very real bars that barricaded my room. He suggested I move into the spare room that was on his dorm floor for second semester, and so I did. Although this room didn't feel like a cell, I couldn't shake the emotional heaviness from the old room that attached itself to the new one. The walls still remained bare. The lingering lifelessness was still able to drift through the crack under the door. Even so, this room was much better, and the people living on the floor, particularly Adrian, included me and cared about me. It was a room inside of a hospital, and I, the patient, slowly recovering from the effects of the cell. The following year, I would live on the same floor, just in a different room than I did second semester, alongside my now good friend Adrian and the new friends that I had made. I loved this room. It almost felt like the one back home, and just like all of the others, the walls remained bare. About a month into this new year, I went away for the weekend, and when I came back, I saw Adrian waiting outside my room. He stood at the door, trying to conceal his smile, his phone in his hand pointed towards me, so I could only assume he was recording. It was like a dad videoing his son on Christmas Day, full of anticipation and excitement. Not knowing what to expect, I opened the door and peered inside. We both fell into uncontrolled laughter as I now saw that he had fully decorated my room with a completely random assortment of items. I tried to absorb it all. I looked across the room, starting to my left and working my way around. There was a purple sequin pillow, a blue cartoon Cinderella poster, a foot-tall snowman statue, a packet of oatmeal duct taped to the wall, an art decor that said "Believe" in bold, handwritten letters, a drawing of an old man and his wife that read "Happy Anniversary" underneath the portrait. And lastly, there was a painting of the night sky with a moon and stars shining above a body of water. The walls were finally covered, and I didn't realize it at the time, but each item served to help it feel like my room again. The sequin pillow gave me comfort when I would trace my hand across those little sequins, finding calm in creating random symbols. The believed decor serving as an inspiration, a beacon of hope and encouragement. The painting of the night sky showing me how the darkest nights can truly make the brightest stars. The oatmeal, along with the other random assortment of items, providing laughter stemming from jokes shared only between two close friends. This room was now colorful, full of life, love, and decorations. It was a room inside the dorm, and I the owner. Living alongside my fellow brothers, the room was finally what it was designed to be. Although the display of decorations that now covered the walls helped to make this room special, it was never about what actually hung on the walls or what didn't, or even about the room itself. All of these rooms were simply boxes with a door and a window. It was, however, the people who lived outside of this box who helped shape it into my room. At the room I live in now at home, it is my family that fills that role. And while I was living at college, it was Adrian. I haven't seen Adrian in more than a year now, as he lives in Nevada, but I hope to see him again soon. Even more, I hope I can find the words to express just how much he helped me during my first 2 years of college. I want him to know how much I appreciate it when he said I should move into that empty room on his floor, how much it meant that I finally had a friend to talk to. I'm not sure he understands how a selfless act of decorating my room, along with his countless other acts of kindness, changed those 2 years into a time I will cherish forever. To the warden who allowed me to escape the prison, to the doctor who helped heal the emotional wounds that prison gave me, to the fellow brother who helped me experience the life of the dorms, thank you.
My work is to pay attention when my mother says, I cried all of my tears that first year I lived in Turkey. To pay attention when my mother says of her freshman roommate, it was like Tigger rooming with Owl. To pay attention when my father says, you should sit by my side and write down everything I say, like the prophet. To pay attention when my nephew says to his sister, all of your teeth are sweet teeth. To pay attention when my nephew says to me, I'd like to see how long you'd last in Azkaban without a book. We all live in relationship with others, with family, friends, colleagues, God. As writers, we need to understand how we are affected by our relationships, to understand how they work or fail to work. Vulnerability becomes a strength for our next group of writers as they develop the theme of friends and family. Shayna Kuik pays attention to an unexpected friendship in My Best Friend, Jan. Shayna?
Perfect. My best friend, Jan. We get the privilege of meeting so many wonderful people in this life. Some we get to call coworkers, some peers, advisors, family, friends, and some we even get to call best friends. I have a theory that there are a lot of different kinds of best friends one can have in life. Most of them are there for a reason or season of your life. You can have that lifelong childhood best friend, that college roommate, a sibling perhaps. Maybe you even consider your significant other to be your best friend. Regardless, I've learned you should never close yourself off to the possibility of making best friends, even if you think you already have enough. Because on one unfortunate side, life can suck sometimes, and true colors will show up in people. And on the other side, you just never know who God is placing in your life. This summer, I got to make a new best friend. This person was definitely not one I would assume could even pass the acquaintance type level of relationship, let alone become a best friend. But life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? I got the opportunity to spend my summer serving at Malibu, a young life camp in Egmont, BC, which is basically on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It takes an hour car ride, a ferry, another 2 hours in a car, and then a tiny water taxi to get to. Oh, and it has no cell service. But thanks for asking, it was the best summer of my life. This is where I met Jan. I was the retail intern, and part of my responsibility was to co-lead our team in the 4 different shops we had with my manager. Our legendary team this summer consisted of a 10-year-old boy who would come to work straight from the pool, still dripping wet, a 12-year-old know-it-all girl who was raised at this camp, and 2 menopausal, sassy grandmothers. With this still being the summer of COVID, it was not a very traditional team, but I grew to love it. We actually even made it into an excerpt for a Young Life newsletter, speaking on age diversity within the organization. Back to best friends. Jan was one of said grandmothers who I got to work with. Every day, her and I would open the Totem Inn, an ice cream shop, at 3 p.m. We fell into a nice routine, made small talk, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. But I never would have guessed how close we were going to become. I think spending so much undistracted time with someone forces you to get to know them quickly, especially when we had this shared life experience. I had never laughed as much as I did when I was with Jan this summer. She seriously felt like a soul sister. The notion of our age gap seemed to totally disappear. We could dance, cry, have inside jokes, dive deep into each other's hopes, dreams, fears, encourage one another in our faith walks, and always be a listening ear. I had so much to learn from Jan. Jan opened up to me about her past and her stories working as a nurse in the Army, or how she came to know God when her marriage seemed to be hitting rock bottom, and how she had grown up in a family full of abuse. She trusted me, basically a complete stranger, with the most intimate details of her life. She'll never fully know just how much that trust meant to me. All summer long, the memories continued to build with Jan. We were an inseparable duo. From working together in the retail shops, scooping endless amounts of ice cream, folding thousands of camp t-shirts, sitting together at mealtimes, hanging out at her boathouse deck, chatting by the pool, and of course dancing together at any possible moment. Jan and I formed a bond stronger than I ever could have wished for. Jan taught me that it's okay to have a past. It's okay to be a kid again, to never stop being sassy, to always dance, to ask the hard questions, and to show love and accept everyone in your path. I think this summer with Jan, in a way, healed my inner child. She brought out the truest, most raw version of myself. She allowed me to be wholly me again, not hometown Shayna, or college Shayna, or work Shayna, just Shayna. Jan showcased in her life that age stereotypes were just that, stereotypes. You can always love like a teenager, laugh like a kid, be wise like an elder, and make mistakes like a 21-year-old. As cheesy as it sounds, it feels as if God placed Jan in my life as an angel. I didn't know the way she had helped me grow and go through things until looking back now and writing this. She was the perfect person I needed that summer. She would roll her eyes if she knew I called her an angel and make a sassy comment about how far-fetched that was. And yes, I know she's obviously not a perfect person, but she was my perfect person, God's gift to me. Saying goodbye to Jan that summer was one of the hardest goodbyes of my life. I've moved back and forth the world twice, had to leave family and loved ones on either side of the border multiple times. And yet hugging Jan that final time as she hopped on the water taxi broke me. Not only because I wasn't sure if or when I would ever see her again, but I also knew it would never be the same as it was here at Malibu. I would never have such an opportunity to be freely me and to learn what that means. I all of a sudden felt like there was so much more I could have learned from her. As I was embracing her, I was crying, and she was almost laughing. The fact is, she had lived a longer life than I. She had been through so much, and the lessons she learned outweighed my short life. She told me to embrace the time we had together, not mourn it. She told me she was my biggest cheerleader in life and couldn't wait to see where I was going to go. We still text back and forth very regularly and send updates. She even mailed me a letter containing a bunch of inside jokes we had, which arrived the first week I was back in the real world. I cried as an outcome of laughter and joy this time, not of mourning or loss. The truth is, I don't know if we will get to do life together again, but I do know I strive every day to live like Jan. I'm grateful for the impact she had on my life, and I can look back and simply smile at how unaware I was of how God was working in both our lives, in me and my best friend Jan.
Join a journey of adoption for Chloe Muljat and her family as she reflects on gaining a sister. Chloe.
I'm in 6th grade, anxiously awaiting the moment I can skip school for a better reason than being sick or breaking a bone. It was cool to skip school in 6th grade, and I wanted to fit in. After begging my parents to take a trip to quite frankly anywhere, one crisp fall morning before school, my mother abruptly sat me down at her desk and swiftly pulled up an email. Nobody sat at my mother's desk except for her. I was confused and nervous. Had I gotten a poor grade on my report card or talked too much during class? My legs shook up and down for fear of what would come next. My mother looked at me with kind eyes and said, "This is your new sister." I gazed into the computer screen and my jaw dropped. I sat staring at a photo of a young girl with a soft smile and pale pink pajamas. She was noticeably young and thin, with deep brown hair. Her skin was dark and tan. I jumped up out of my seat with 1,000 burning questions on my mind. My parents had always talked about adopting one child, but never two. My brother Luke had been adopted from Ethiopia earlier this year. The bus reached our house. My other siblings frantically reached for their binders and backpacks that spread across the table. I stood holding my mother's arm as she looked at me with a huge smile and asked, "Would you want to come to China to bring your sister home?" As someone who never passes up a trip, I could not miss the journey of a lifetime adopting my sister, especially if that meant I could skip school. I packed up my belongings and grabbed the assignment my younger brother had left crumpled on the table while he sprinted to the bus. I went to school holding the biggest secret of all. My mother told me not to share the news until the paperwork was finalized and made official. My mother, father, and younger sister Marissa and I packed our bags and flew to Beijing a month later. We spent 2 weeks traveling around China per the government's rules. We experienced many cities and enjoyed lots of delicious foods. Finally, the day we had all been waiting for arrived. We made it to Nanjing, China, our final destination. We quickly packed our belongings from our tiny, unkept hotel room that smelled of cigarettes and dirt and ran to meet the shuttle. We stood outside the bus, anxiously awaiting the 2-hour car ride ahead of us, breathing in the contaminated air. My sister and I, tired of standing, sat on the curb with open ears, listening to those around us, speaking a language we did not understand. My parents stood chatting with the other families, who also stood tense, waiting to meet their new daughters. Finally, the shuttle approached, and we leaped on, knowing our return would look quite different. This long-awaited moment was here and happening. My sister and I listened as the shuttle driver acted as our tour guide, pointing out important details within the city. 2 hours felt like 4. Driving through the city, it felt as though it had never slept. I bombarded my parents with questions of what she would look and be like, and they did not have answers, having seen only 3 pictures of their new daughter. How could this moment we anticipated for so long be real? It felt like a dream. The shuttle turned a corner to a grand hotel whose name remains lost in translation. My dad's legs shook up and down. This was it. We exited the shuttle and were guided up a long staircase following an orphanage caregiver with broken English. As we reached the top, many young girls stood spread out, grasping their caregivers with fear. Having seen only a few pictures of my new sister, we passed by 10 other children, looking for any resemblance of the girl we so longed for. She stood quiet, thin, and naive in her pale pink pajamas, carrying nothing but a single grocery bag. Her shoes were torn and had holes and broken straps. She did not speak. My sister and I stood close, watching my parents meet my new sister for the first time. I held my pink camera close to my chest, capturing a moment I would never forget. My mom delicately picked up my sister. She felt like a stranger. Tears crawled down her rosy cheeks. Her lip quivered, and her tears felt as though they would never stop. She was confused and afraid. My mother put her down and saw the photo book our family had sent her in a plastic bag she carried. My mom opened the book and pointed to Marissa and then to me. My mother said, "These are your sisters, Chloe and Marissa." She looked at the photo and then at us. Her caregiver understood the connection and whispered the words into her ears. At that moment, the sadness and loneliness her face carried disappeared. Marissa and I came closer. I handed her a lollipop, and as she tasted the sweetness of the candy, her caregiver hugged her goodbye and gently nudged her towards us. Sisters.
Gabriela Volpe pays attention to her grandfather in Until It's Gone. Gabby.
I've always heard the phrase, you don't know what you have until it's gone. The first time I heard this phrase, my dad was reminiscing the old days with his brother. I never met my uncle, as he passed away in a car accident. This phrase kept coming back to my life through different people who were experiencing some sort of loss. However, I can never relate to them. This was until the spring of 2021. I had been longing to go back home, but due to a pandemic and living abroad, I had to rethink my long-term plans. I had to stay in Canada. After a year of adversities and resilience, I was finally able to go back home. Now, it was May 15th. This meant Mother's Day and Independence Day in Paraguay. My brothers and I had planned a small surprise for our mom. We were going to make her breakfast, scrambled eggs, ham and cheese sandwich, some sweets, and of course, coffee. We also bought her a small gift, a matching set of earrings and a necklace. This Mother's Day was special. It was the first time in a few years that the whole family was together. It was 4 a.m. when I woke up to my mom's voice on the phone. I could hear her through the thin walls of her bathroom that connect to my bathroom. Suddenly, I heard the door from her room being opened abruptly and her car keys. I got up as fast as I could to ask her what had happened. All she said was, I don't know, something happened to Grandpa. At that moment, my heart started pounding. The worst thoughts spiraled on my mind as I watched my mom leave. All I could do was go back to bed and wait. As I stared at the ceiling, counting some lines that were randomly there, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it all felt like a dream. I went out of my room to look for my mom and nothing. She was not there. I started thinking that maybe this was real. I knew that my dad would know what was happening. The question was if I wanted to know. I grabbed all the courage I did not have for the question I was dreading to ask. What happened? I asked to my dad. He started coughing blood, so Mom went to see him. As a person that does not understand much of medicine, I knew this was not good. The day went on and not a sign of my mom or my grandpa. We all dealt with the uncertainty in diverse ways. My older brother tried doing some work for his job that until today I do not fully understand what it is. My dad watched some YouTube videos about how to drop shipping or what is an NFT. My younger brother had no clue what was happening as he was still asleep. And then there was me. I went to the living room by myself to wait for answers. One could even say I looked like a dog waiting for its owner. Laying down on the sofa, I remember my childhood and how my grandpa played a huge role during that time. He taught all his grandchildren what a loving father, husband, and grandfather looked like. I replayed the memories I had of him over and over in my head. It was almost 4 p.m. when I saw the gate open. I was going to get some answers. However, I was not ready for it. The entire day I was waiting for this uncertainty to be over, yet now this uncertainty was my only way to escape reality. How is he? My dad asked. I was relieved that I did not have to make the first move. He's okay now, my mom answered. Hearing that answer was like a burden was taken off me. They think it's cancer, my mom said as her voice cracked. At that moment, I felt the burden again, but this time it was 10 times heavier. The image of what cancer looked like was all based on movies or stories. This word was foreign to me. All I can think at that time was on my younger brother's classmate that passed away from cancer. Would that also happen to my grandpa? How would my mom bear this? Who is going to stay with my grandma? All these questions popped in my head in a matter of seconds. They still need to make him some tests, said my mom with tears in her eyes. I have to go back to him. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe, just maybe, this was not cancer. After a few days of tests and surgeries, they gave the results back to my grandpa. It was cancer, tongue cancer. Throughout this entire process, I saw my mom being as optimistic as she could, being strong for my grandfather. But when she got the results, I watched her fall apart. It was the lowest moment of our lives. My mom having to deal with his dad having cancer, and me having to watch my mom being strong even when she couldn't. This is when I remember the phrase, that phrase that felt it was meant to be for everyone else but me. Now I was able to empathize with that phrase and I hated it. However, it taught me to appreciate even the insignificant moments in life because those moments make life meaningful. Thank you.
Samantha Forbes pays attention to the lyrics of her mother's favorite song, In the Rose. Samantha.
Some say love. I sat next to my mother on a cinnamon brown, faux leather ottoman that faced the record player. The white cracks that striated the material revealed its age and its agency. It was the place I often watched my mother enrapture herself in melodies, one of the few things that brought her utter and complete joy. Her presence was home. It is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love. Vinyl albums conceal the carpeted living room floor, so I turn my feet inward, curling my toes to ensure their safety. I cling to an album cover, holding it close to my chest, using the fingers with faded, glittering nail polish. I wipe the dust that settled from it being stored underneath the bed. My mother was eclectic, and her collection included country to rhythm and blues with every genre in between. The things that brought her contentment satisfied me. It is a razor that leaves your soul to bleed. Some say love. Hanging her head to one side, she glanced through her collection as she poured herself a glass of wine. I remember thinking how pretty she looked in a sunflower sundress. Her expressions of delight were reminiscent of Cinderella at the ball, twirling with Prince Charming. It did not matter that the clock would soon strike 12. In that dance, she was incandescently happy. At that moment, that was all my little girl's mind could compare her to. I could see her forgetting the struggles she had, the ones that I was not mentally aware of but could somehow feel. I was maybe only 6 years old, but the umbilical connection remained. I felt her moods, her joy, and her pains. It is a hunger, an endless aching need. Silence preceded the sound of the player's needle setting on the vinyl. The chords prepared me to listen to the lyrics. The scent of sweet wine traveled from her mouth as she sang, and peace in those moments washed over me like warm ocean tides. Its retreat therapeutically took with it any tensions. All that was left was just us and music. She taught me to focus on the words of each song, to absorb and meditate on its message. Our living room became her classroom, and on this day, the subject was the rose. The song began. The music infused all of me as I listened to the melody of her voice-created duet with Bette Midler. This enrapturing caused a dramatic sensation to cascade over me. The erecting hairs on my arms was revelatory of its power. This phenomenon is known as frisson, happens in those with an intense connection to art and beauty. The music was art. She was beauty. As the melody left her lips, she looked intensely yet tenderly at me. She was not just singing. She was teaching her daughter what she learned was most vital in life: love. Her quivering lips and her moist eyes told me she believed the words she sang. I say love, it is a flower, and you, its only seed. My mother did not have more than a 7th grade education. Motherhood began early, forcing her to work independently and care for 6 children. Nevertheless, she was the wisest, most brilliant woman alive. She had a PhD in life, and I was her most important student. My young heart held on to those lyrics and to her lesson. There was a passionate joy in those moments, yet paradoxically, there was pain. It's the heart afraid of breaking that never learns to dance. It's the dream afraid of waking that never takes the chance. As life had taught her, she wanted me to know that love did not rescind affliction. Because of this, the essential human need could cause many to live in fear, placing up walls of safety, never allowing one to truly live. The hardships of life can cause winter seasons to last longer than we would desire. But if we persevere, spring will come, and the seeds that seem buried will yield the beauty the world needs. I never forgot that song. It's the one who won't be taken, who cannot seem to give, and the dream afraid of waking that never learns to live. The ending of her journey on earth buried my heart in the stabbing pain that the severe cold can bring. I felt as though I would never again experience the intimacy the ottoman and the vinyl records once gave me. That was my winter. As Ecclesiastes says, there is a time and season for everything. There is hope because seasons change. 20 years later, I chose the theme for my wedding. Although my mother was not present in body, she was present in spirit, because on that ottoman, she prepared my heart for that day and commitment. Her melody was the trowel that opened the soil of my being, planting the truth about love. I was love's seed. And the night has been so lonely, and the road has been too long, and you think that love is only for the lucky and the strong. My wedding metaphored the beginning of a spring, where all that seemed dead divulged the truth that life still existed. Spring is an awakening. Spring is resurrection. Just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love, in the spring becomes the rose. Years later, the seed of love has given me a rose garden. There have been many winters, but spring has always been faithful to arrive. I look at my sons and sing the same song. Once again, I feel the agency of home and the lessons in the music I pass on. It is the bastion where she lives on.
I know we have intermission scheduled, but I think rather than break the mood, we will continue. One of the challenges of narrative nonfiction is to make the journey to a deeper place where soul meets experience, to make a connection between imagination and intellect, between heart and head. My work is to remember that I always wanted to be a writer, and that one day my father turned to a friend of his and said, "This is my daughter. She's trying to be a writer." And then he corrected himself and said, "She is a writer." My work is to tell you that without art, we would be in a world without art. My work is to believe in everybody's capacity for kindness. My work is to believe in everybody's capacity for cruelty. My work is the bird of dawn, the tale of my grief, the thief of love, the city of beauties, the nest of snakes, the helping animal, the animated doll, the transformative power of love, the juice of a single grape. My work is to imagine a world without art so that there is never a world without art. Tatum Bergen reflects on the research she undertook for her undergraduate thesis on the education received by refugee girls in East Africa. When I close my eyes, she says, I see 1,000 refugee girls. Tatum.
When I close my eyes, I see 1,000 refugee girls. Their dancing feet shake the ground with arms outstretched to form a T and hands pointing towards the sky. The rhythms revive the bleak camp. Their songs disrupt despair. Rwandan, Congolese, Burundian, South Sudanese, Eritrean, hand in hand, their suffering has bound them together into a mosaic of strength. Their graceful feet pound, and the red dirt shakes and dances in response to a ruckus of laughter that would echo off the schoolyard if it had walls. After all, they are still only girls, but with stories that could fill a lifetime. They came here as children and young mothers, fleeing the peaceless corners of the sub-Saharan to these barren plots of land, Uganda's rural refugee settlements, where they hope to build new homes and new futures. There, on the horizon, beyond the shaking ground, a dusty red orb hangs, sitting low, a blazing hope. Orange light sifts through the moringa trees and matoki leaves, casting a spotlight that turns the dancing schoolyard into a stage. Red rays, like the ghost of spilled blood, falls on UN blue tarps. The light follows the red roads, past the lean-tos and over tin roofs, down the pathways, through the dusty fields. There, through the classroom window, the light sits in the classroom chairs, illuminating script from that day's English lesson, written in white chalk, now turned gold. I am a girl. When I close my eyes, I am haunted by 1,000 barriers. This week was the beginning of primary 7, and roll called echoed with absence. Fiona, here. Doreen, here. Bona, Mary, Clements, Rhoda, Monday, Faith, all are silent. Oli Balungi, my sister, are you well? Why does your chair sit desolate? 2 weeks ago, when school fees were due, Mary turned to her mother, with 5 other children to feed and a husband sacrificed to the war, and with downcast eyes asked for the tuition she needed to attend. She received only the back of a hand against her tear-stained face. She was too afraid to return to school empty-handed. In primary 6, her attendance showed that Clements had missed a total of 10 weeks of school. Her father had turned to her and seethed, You are stupid and a fool. Your brothers have performed better than you, and you would rather sit at home. She didn't tell him that the boys mocked her when she bled through her uniform the first time, and that the teacher sent her home, but that she never had the money to buy sanitary pads. She wondered to herself why the boys did not bleed. Rhoda told her uncle that she would attend school this year, and she beamed when she recalled the phrase that she had learned in the Rising Star Leadership Club. Marriage can wait, but education can't. Instead of laughing alongside her, his shoulders stiffened, and he retorted with their culture, saying, Educating girls is a waste of time. He went on to tell her that he had already received offers and that she would marry this year, an older man in the community, and her dowry would pay for the school fees of her brothers and cousins. This marriage would pay for what she owed him as a foster child. By the first day of primary 7, she was pregnant, a mother-to-be at 14 years old. In class yesterday, the grit of sand lingered between Faith's teeth, the remnants of her last meal, ground maize paste mixed with sand, a white starchy mass called posho. Tasteless, devoid of any nutrition, she hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. Her teacher whipped her yesterday because she fell asleep in biology, her favorite class, because it would help her become a nurse one day. He called her lazy as the boys laughed. She bit her tongue and didn't tell him that she had passed out. She couldn't manage the 7-kilometer walk to school the next morning. When I close my eyes, I hear 1,000 dreams. Their voices echo in my ears. I study to show my fellow refugee girls, my community, that education is possible for refugee girls. I want to be a role model. I want to show parents the importance of education for girls so they can build a better life. I want girls to know that if I can make it, they can too. So when I close my eyes, I see Bona sifting through the fields, searching for her sisters and daughters, beckoning them to return to school. I see Faith, clothed in a lab coat, tending to patients in the local clinic. I see Mary stand firm in court, demanding justice and ending corruption. I see Rhoda stand in front of a classroom brimming with students, teaching them that marriage can wait when they stay focused and diligent. I see Clements hold the hand of a grieving mother, tending to internal wounds of trauma, violence, and neglect. I see Fiona stand among them all, calling to all refugee girls that they are capable of resilience, confidence, and the dreams they hold. Perhaps tomorrow will be a new day. Perhaps tomorrow I will hear 1,000 pages turn, 1,000 arms raised to ask 1,000 questions. Perhaps I will see brimming classrooms and chairs and hear giggles burst through classroom doors. Perhaps I will close my eyes and hear their voices say with pride, I am a girl.
In a journey with words, True Pay Na Moo reflects on the quest to overcome challenges to read. True.
Journey with words. On the porch of our bamboo home in the refugee camp was my earliest memory of reading in a foreign language. At an early age, it was visible to me that my mother was curious by nature. And I think that that's what drove her passion for education. Yet, a part of me also believed that the harsh life she endured may have helped her see opportunity education can offer. To translate exactly from Korean, my mother tongue, to English, the statement my mother repeats to my siblings and I echo like the words of a motivational speaker. If you want to overthrow your enemy, you must first learn their language. Only then you can stand a chance. And if you have education, no matter where you go, your face will not be small. To my mother, a big white face meant power. Unlike my mother, my life experiences was composed of playing under the golden sun and dancing among the moons and rain. So when she enrolled me into Burmese school, I could not see the benefit she saw. It felt like my tiny brown eyes had been blindfolded by my innocence, and I questioned why my mother wanted me to suffer under the ruthless Burmese teachers. On one evening, she had lost all patience trying to teach me to read. I can recall the frustration she wore on her face. With her eyebrows lowered and pulled together, I hear, "Why don't you just get it?" Although I don't have the gut to say this out loud, I thought to myself, "Why don't you get it, Mom? We don't speak Burmese. We don't need it and we don't use it." Thankfully, my teenage cousin was visiting from the city. He was fluent in the language, so upon my mother's request, he replaced her as my Burmese tutor. I can vividly remember the tropical evening breeze rushing through the porch as I struggled sounding out the words. Although he was patient with me, the experience I had with my mother left me wounded. Amid my struggle, I thought to my 7-year-old self, "This just sucks." From that point on, I was convinced that reading is not meant for me. With this belief, I only read for school purposes. Like toxic mold, rooting in itself in food sources, then spreading outwardly, the belief I carried took roots in my mind. It led me to believe that I do not have the ability to finish any book. Time passes swiftly as my body and soul mellowed into a young, curious girl with much to experience, yet with the same attitude towards reading. I am now entering a new chapter of my life in a foreign land they call Canada, a land more than 7,000 miles from everything I am familiar with. Here, people dress differently, talk differently, look differently, and smell different. There are a greater range of skin color, body shape, height, and size. Every word that came out of the people's mouth sounded like a bunch of hisses and sizzling sound to me. I caught myself staring at everything and everyone, and I was frightened. The only reason that made it possible for my family to come to such land was because the Canadian government resettled us as government-assisted refugees. Although I came to realize that life in an isolated refugee camp was like a pitiful bird with no wings, my mother described our new life in Canada as newborn babies learning to walk and talk for the first time. Being a foreigner in a new land helped rekindle my bitter relationship with learning a foreign language. Just when I thought my struggle to keep my nose in the book cannot get worse, I found myself stuck in Miss Wilson's classroom. This time, my battle was against Miss Wilson's 20-minute daily silent reading. When the afternoon approached, I can feel the aching in my brain knowing that soon it would be time for the class to go silent. With the help of their books, each student drawn into the world of ideas, inspirations, and creativity between the four walls of our classroom. But I, on the other hand, feel sick from the encounter with the words unfamiliar to me on the white pages. Up to this point, the greater lesson I have learned from my relationship with words was how to fake read during what seems to be an endless 20 minutes. Despite all this, one of my greatest fantasies was to be by the blue water sitting in a swing that hangs from a grand green tree with my favorite book in hand. My heart yearns to find the endurance to read and to fall madly in love with the words, but instead it was the idea I was in love with. I am now a young, adventurous 20 years old setting foot into another foreign land. I flew across the ocean to South Asia for mission work in Nepal. I would be lying if I told you that I have given up on reading, because somewhere deep within me, I always knew there was a secret place inside the words. All I needed was a breakthrough, and all I needed was to learn to read between the lines. After many failed attempts, I once again picked up my Bible as I sat underneath a grand tree in front of Napoli's church. I could feel my sweat dripping underneath the beautiful turquoise kurta that wraps around my skin. This time something has changed, and I can recall the beauty of dwelling into the words of Genesis as the noise fades out around me. While my finger slides between the lines, I thought to myself, how creative is the one that made me? My love for reading became a reality, and it was greater than what my miniature brain could ever comprehend. The creation story, the fall of humanity, and the splendid stories of God and His people fascinates me, and I did not want the moment to end. I knew then that the wonderful book God had written is the book I had been looking for. There, amid boiling humidity in a foreign land, I experienced true love with words, and in return, I felt loved.
How do we find true value? Amy Bebawi listens for the sound of understanding. Amy.
I think so. I think I'm good. The sound of understanding. Recorder. I walked in with a bright smile on my face, and the waddled stride of my 6-year-old legs revealed my pride and confidence in what I was about to present. I walked into my weekly Friday class full of other homeschoolers like myself. Friday was the day we went to learn things taught by an actual teacher at the nearby Christian school, while our moms got 6 hours of quiet to catch up on laundry and grocery shopping. I don't remember the occasion. Maybe it was show and tell, or maybe we were learning about different cultures. But I walked into class that day wearing my bright red Egyptian headscarf and galabeya, pridefully knowing I would be different than everyone else in the mostly Caucasian Canadian classroom. My red dress and headscarf with matching tassels bordering every inch that they could helped me make sure that I would stand out. Without a care in the world, I got up in front of that class, probably shook my Middle Eastern hips a bit, and blurted out everything my 6-year-old mind knew about Egypt. Percussion. Life seemed to get loud after moving back to Egypt. It seemed like everywhere I looked, a part of my life would crash and scatter away from my reach and control. I was in 3rd grade, and school was where I could escape the loud yelling of adults for some peace and quiet. My friend and I sat on the swing, letting the wind gently push us back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. And amid the lull, I began to whisper to her, "Can I tell you a secret?" "Sure," she said. "My parents are getting divorced." The awe and shock of such a sentence at a school full of missionary kids with perfect families was exactly what it was expected to be. Bass. There seemed to be a constant underlying sadness that I felt deep, no matter what was going on around me. I felt its constant rhythm in my soul. It never stopped. It never left. It never quit. The audience. What are they going to think? My motivator for so many of the decisions I made in middle school and high school. My crush is going to think this is stupid. My mom's not going to approve. My teacher's going to think this is dumb. My friends are going to think I'm not cool enough. Trumpet. I had to be the perfect child. I volunteered for everything I could. I helped out with the nursery and Sunday school at my Egyptian church. I was student government vice president. I was first chair trumpet in band. I maintained high marks. I was everyone's therapist, including my parents. And every time my own pains made themselves known through a shower of tears, I would just nonchalantly say I knew God loved me and was in the process of healing me. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't escape. My suppression of my emotions, my hurt and burnout, manifested itself in chronic dizzy spells. It was my body's version of a headache. I knew they would come anytime I felt unloved. I left school early, time and time again, to jump from doctor to doctor with my mom and take test after test, but they all declared me to be completely fine. Somewhere deep inside me, I knew that this dizziness was a result of emotions I wasn't letting myself feel. I knew that something had to change. I was not okay living under the spell of dizziness forever. Symphony. The lessons began, sometimes gently and quietly, and sometimes with a big clash and jolt. Slowly, I began to realize people's opinions did not matter as much as I thought they did. Like a clashing cymbal, it hit me. These aren't all my burdens to carry. Like a soft flute, the truth of how loved I am gently found its way into my heart. The sweet sound of a kind violin taught me that I was allowed to be still and rest. As the steady rhythm of my heart slowly got louder and louder and louder and louder, I learned how to be human again instead of taking the place of a perfect God. As I let go of my grip and allow my feet to tap to the beat, I have relearned to shake my hips a bit and confidently display the entirety of who I was created to be. Every note, every melody, every pause.
MacKenna Wilson seeks God on the central coast of California, beyond the shoreline. MacKenna.
I grew up not far from the ocean in the heart of the Central Coast, California. While not the warmest part of the state, nor the most renowned, the area has the most pristine, immaculate beaches, with the fresh scents of salt and seaweed always hanging in the air. Carmel Beach, in particular, has the finest sand and an expansive shoreline that will keep one walking alongside it for miles without even noticing until the sun nuzzles the horizon, gently hinting that it's time to make the long journey back. Often swathed in sheets of fog, this beach is not well suited for packs of beer and boogie boards, but instead, hardcover books, steaming cups of drip coffee, and flaky croissants from cafes up the hill. The shore is lined with binds of sandpipers with their wide eyes and gangly legs, scavenging for small crustaceans in the spongy sand. One might see a golden retriever speed through the binds and vault into the froth to fetch tennis balls, the birds scattering in the wake of all the splash and spatter. On top of the ice plant line's cliffside are the million-dollar houses, most of them very modern and box-like, but just one that looks like a small castle, clad in stone with a distinctive fantasy-esque appeal. It always reminded me of the seaside castle of Cair Paravel in the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, I am well past the age at which the great lion Aslan would tell me that I am too old to return to Narnia, that I would have to learn to know him by another name in my own world, a world where my faith could waver like the ever-changing tide, or perhaps even crumble and ruin like Cair Paravel eventually did in the books. Tasted and seen. It was the morning of my high school senior beach retreat, a bonding field trip for upcoming graduates. I could usually suppress the tears in the mornings after leaving for school, but that day the tears would not stop falling. Curled up in the back of the stuffy bus on the way there, my body could not keep itself from shaking and choking back sobs, no matter how hard I fought. I focused all of my energy on the sole task of staying quiet, praying that I could calm down, praying that she would be okay. That morning, my mom had locked herself in her bathroom. She didn't want me to see her screaming from the pain caused by the radiation treatment for her breast cancer. She had been violently vomiting all through the night. "Mom, can I please call you an ambulance?" I pleaded. "No, honey, I'll be okay. The doctor said this was normal. It's all part of it. Go have fun today, okay?" was her strained and breathy reply, muffled by the door between us. How could God allow her anguish to be so drawn out? The only reason I left to go on the trip is because she would feel even worse if I didn't. There was nothing I could do to help, though it didn't feel any less selfish. Once we got to the beach and got off the bus, the last thing I wanted to do was to play the cheesy bonding games that the Student Leadership Council had planned for us. Instead, I sat on an oak log, resting on the shoreline, and stared out at the water, hoping to calm down. The ocean appeared dark teal under all the fog and overcast. Hugging my sweater tightly around myself, I tried to calm down by anchoring my gaze in the steady, rhythmic waters, still crying, still praying. After some time, this was interrupted. Flocks of gulls started to circle above the water, getting closer and closer to the surface with each spiral.
Normally, the appearance of seagulls at the beach would be less than remarkable, annoying in fact. These gulls appeared to circle over a singular area. What could be over there? A few moments passed, and I felt my eyes widen as it could only mean one thing: whales. As if it heard my thought, a massive barnacle-veiled humpback broke the water surface. It was as if it were in slow motion, not far off the shore at all, only about 30 feet or so. It showed its marvelous length as it began its slow descent back under, snowy froth cascading down its back. I felt the tears on my face halt as the mast-like tail emerged from out of the water with finality. As quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The water stilled, and my heart was calm for the first moment in weeks. Contented that I'd just seen something of ephemeral magnificence, I stood up from the log to leave to get something to drink. But then, more gulls circled another patch of water. Before I had time to think, 2 more whales popped up and dove back under. Then 3, 4, until an entire pot of whales was before me, feeding, spouting, playfully breaching. I wish I could have been under the water so I could hear their songs. It became harder to see as my eyes pulled with tears once again, but this time with tears of wonderment. The fog eventually parted, and the whales sparkled celestially. Was I the only one who could see them? It seemed so. Nobody else in my class even glanced over. Was this a miracle? I can tell you what my heart knows. It was an unspoken promise. She'll be okay. I'm with her. Trust in me. Living water. I'm not sure why God has always used the beach and the ocean as teaching tools for me. Perhaps it is because I've always been drawn to it, as many are, for its dichotomous complexity, abundant in life, yet a tomb all in one, tumultuous, yet peaceful. The enormity of the ocean, like the enormity of God, is something that I will never fully comprehend. Another reason would be that I was fed on fairy tales growing up. I can confess that I see much of my life through the lens of the Chronicles of Narnia series. Like Lucy, I encountered Aslan as a child before encountering Jesus in my own world. The beach is the edge of Aslan's country, the land beyond the Shadowlands, where he lives and reigns at the right hand of his father. I am reminded of the voyage of the Dawn Treader, at a part where the characters start to fear that they will face a watery death in the wake of catastrophe. In the midst of their doubt and panic, Lucy utters a prayer, and Aslan appears to her as an albatross, circling the mast of the ship, and whispers what only she can hear: "Courage, dear heart." When I am at the beach, God calls me out onto the water with him, my anxious spirit wanting to latch on to safety. But I remember that he isn't safe or tame, but he is good. Whether he appears as a seabird or as a pod of whales, I know he's there in his country, just beyond the shoreline.
In Consciousness, a collection of moments and reflections, Christa Lyford recounts the times when she remembers. Christa.
Consciousness, Part 1, Sleep. I woke from dreams of the shuffling dead and infected, only a lock on the door to keep them out, only my family inside to keep safe. They drifted in and out of the walls, my sister and mother, and I would turn to see the door cracked open, my brother incredulously asking, "Well, what if someone needs to come in?" I can only berate so many times, only throw my weight against the door and pray, only fumble the deadbolt sturdy and hope it will stay that way when my back is turned. My father loads his shotgun, sets the barrel up right underneath his chin, tags of permits and white paper loops around the stock with zip ties and his finger on the trigger. "If you turn, you're going to have to pull that. I can't let you infect us all." There are children now underneath my feet. I try to keep them quiet, and the rattling moans of the undead outside do nothing to deter their rowdiness. "We're going to church on Sunday," my mother says. "Would you want to come with us?" The lock is undone again, but I'm on the other side of the room, 10 paces away, with a near-crying toddler at the end of my arms, and I can only stare with agonized intensity, willing my thoughts into physical presence, willing that the door will stay shut, hushing the child, fixed on the lock. My father is resting his chin on the end of the shotgun barrel. I wake up and remember he died this summer, a month before school started.
He's buried on a hillside by the trees. Part 2, Stream. I bled on the stovetop last night. I'd caught the under-oven warming drawer as it rolled off its rails, crouched down on the crumbed kitchen floor, trying to reach the baking sheet that had fallen behind. The edges slipped through my hands, greased and sharp. A clean slice through the first 3 fingers of my left hand, deep, dark red marks. There a dulled stinging in the left hemisphere of my consciousness now. Flexing my fingers is a tug of skin against cold air, exposed. Does it feel like gills? My boyfriend asks. It does when I've sliced my hand like that before. I curl and uncurl them. My roommates are talking in the kitchen, and I am cradled in the couch, curling and uncurling. Thank you for cleaning up around here. Appreciate the consistency. Know I can count on you. I know she's not talking about me, but it feels like she is. I clean the stovetop because she hasn't spoken to me in days, and I fall asleep 5 feet across from her every night, silent. She hates my clutter and she hates my chatter, and last semester she told me, it's hard for me when you cry yourself to sleep at night sometimes. And the gills remind me of the fish I had last year, staring with its bulbous, empty eyes, nowhere to swim but back and forth across its tank. Nowhere to go but sleep on the couch, curl and uncurl. Part 3, Everywhere. Everywhere there are dead fathers. The theater, the books, the stages, the movie screens. They clutter the literature I read, the histories of the poets I study. I sit in class and hear about graves and burial and the symbolism of caskets, lilies, gravestones. I sit in dark auditoriums and watch amateur actors rehearse fake funerals, straining their words to emote saying, he was sick and he's dead now and you weren't there, you wouldn't understand, you weren't there for me. And maybe it's the 3 cups of crap coffee or the 4 hours of sleep on my damp pillow, but I leave in the middle of the performance and sit in the hallway. Their voices resonate through the walls. He's dead, he died, and you left me alone. It's a watery sickness, a slow drowning. I sit in the hallway, hollow. Part 4, Until. He is gone until the next time I pass a garage sale. He is gone until someone orders a root beer float. He's gone until I see the vest he bought me hanging in the back of my closet. He's gone until I hear someone say, holy smokes, or I see a dark, crisp waffle or the engine light on my car turns on. He's gone until the next nightmare, where he will sit or stand or say things to me, and for a moment I know something is wrong. He's not supposed to be here. But I'll always wake up, and then I will remember.
My work is to tell you this. Years ago, I was on the subway in Manhattan, and we stopped between stations, and the staticky voice came on the speaker and said there would be a delay of 20 minutes, and cursing ripped through the car as if a tribe of the homeless mad had just swept into our presence. But then a young woman across from me took out a small pile of paper, and she started folding red origami swans. And each time she finished one, she handed it to one of us. My work is my origami swans. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to all our readers for sharing their stories and their vulnerability. We wish you all inspiration, creativity, and a blessed Easter. Thank you for joining us tonight.